So in this video, I'm going to show some of my own architecture projects because many of you asked me about that. And I don't want to just preach on my channel and let's say modern architecture is not good the way it is. And I also want to show an example how I think we could make it better. So I will show 3 projects that I designed with my own small architecture practice. You see the name and the website here on the bottom. And these 3 projects are, I chose 3 examples. And of course, I don't want to say it's the only way you can do it, right? It's just a suggestion as a proposal to how I think we could build nowadays to make it better. But of course, you can have your own opinion about it. So I always encourage critical thinking. So let me know your own opinion about that in the comments. So the first project I want to show is a small hotel in the south of France in a lively street that has already like classical architecture in it. So I chose a quite representative application of the classical architecture. And it has the archetypical temple motif in the center, right, to give the building a face and address. And it has like all these elements in it, as all my projects, that are called timeless elements of architecture that I lay out in another video. So I don't think we should apply like classical architecture, like classicism, like one-to-one as it was done like 200 years ago, but we should interpret it and modify it in a way that's like suitable for our current time. So in this case, I barely use any ornament. The building is very reduced. It just follows all the principles that I lay out in the other video, and it also follows the classical architecture proportion, which make this building, in my opinion, timeless and quite elegant. So in this case, the temple porticos uses the proportion of the Corinthian order, and also the entablature that you see here that closes the building is designed in the correct classical canonical proportion in relationship to the column height. So the proportion of the Corinthian order. But as you see, even the capital is not worked out. So this building does not have any ornament. I mean, if you want to do ornament, I think you can. But in my opinion, you don't have to, as long as you apply this classical grammar. And if you look in the facade here, you also see the classical proportions are applied in different ways. So if you look, for example, the temple porticos follows the classical proportion of a square. And if you take the plain sides, the plain plaster fields on the sides in addition, the proportion of the laying rectangle is like 2:1 again. So the classical 2:1 proportion. If you take then the basement in addition, so the first floor, you reach a perfect square again. So and also in other fields, I use the classical Palladian proportions that I lay out in my other proportion video. And using these classical Palladio proportion gives it a feeling of harmony and stability, and harmony strongly correlates to beauty. So it's a simple plaster building, right? But also important is it uses also what I call the timeless grammar of the vertical sequence. So you see the base here, the first floor, is just indicated with these thin rustica lines. And the arcs, so this floor hosts like cafe and restaurant, right? And of course the entrance. And then the main, so that's the base, right? And then the main body, the corpus of the house is floor 2 and 3, with a quite plain plaster facade. And then I always say every building needs an upper closure, like every music piece or symphony has, right? And in this case, it has the entablature that I said has a correct proportion in relationship to the columns. But it also has this mansard roof on top. So technically it has like 2 upper closures. So, and as you see, the window frames are very simple, but on the other hand, so where the hole of the window meets the wall, it's an important point in the building, right? So that's why I think we should elaborate that. And it has this very simple, but still like slightly detailed window frames around the windows. So overall, I think it's a suitable modern interpretation of classical design, and I hope it's quite timeless. Another building I want to show is a bit older design of mine, so I wouldn't do everything exactly like that nowadays, but it's an apartment house designed for Hamburg, and I show it, to show that you can also do apartment houses with this classical language and the principles of classical architecture. And this one uses nearly no columns, so you find the classical columns and temple motif only in the frame of the main entrance and the first floor, right? But you could also exchange that or leave it away. So this is just like an additional element. So this I mentioned to show that you can apply classical architecture or design in the language of classical architecture without using columns and pilasters and so on. So here we have also again this what I call the timeless grammar of vertical sequence. We have a base indicated with this strong line, right? And then we have the main corpus of these three upper floors, second, third, and fourth floor. And we have a quite strong entablature, and that's so strong because the proportion of the entablature, again, is set in relationship to the main corpus of the house, which is 3 floors in this case. So that's why the entablature is pretty heavy or strong, but gives the house also a character. And then we have this kind of penthouse on top, which is a bit like a crown, so it's a bit untypical element, but I think it matches together. And here the windows use the classical canon that I mentioned before. So the main floor would be the second floor, and the windows have a proportion of 2 to 1, right? And then the windows reduce its height the higher the floor gets. So the third floor has a window proportion of 1 to root 3, and the fourth floor has a window proportion of 1 to root 2, which is 1 to 1.4142. So that means the windows become shorter the higher the floor is, and this is actually the classical system. So here it's applied in the strict canonical way. And what I like about this building is the side facade in particular, because it follows the same motive as the balconies on the back. So the balconies, I will elaborate further soon, but the side facade is an element to connect the balconies with the main body of the house, because it follows the same principle as the balconies, just like steam down, let's say, into a flat layer. So these 3 window axes are connected in this risalit, and the design is actually the same as the balconies, just like steam to one level, to one layer. So I like this system. And also the balconies I mentioned here because classical architecture did not really have, these apartment houses with balconies. So the question is always how to add the balconies, and I think they should not be flying in front of the facade because it's atectonic as it's done sometime. But here we see so the first floor, it has more space for a terrace, and then the upper 2 floors use this what's called loggia, right? So it still has a tectonic element because the pillars, so they carry the loads. And then on the last floor, on the 4th floor here, we can do another terrace. So we also have an interpretation of the vertical sequence here and the balconies, and still they have a tectonic system, right? And then of course the terrace of the penthouse on top. So in the third and last project I want to show is a very small single family home, also designed for Hamburg. And I show that because it's pretty simple, and it's just an example how simple classical architecture can be. So this house would not be very expensive. It's a normal plaster building, right? And but it's, I think, less boring than most of the single family homes that are built. And it also follows, again, this classical vertical sequence of a base, then the main body of the house, and the upper closure here. So the upper closure, the entablature here, in this case, it's quite thin because, to be honest, this is in this case, freely designed. So except the overall proportion that you see in the elevation, quite many elements here are freely designed in that house. They just follow the classical language, as I said. But it's a very simple way of doing so. So they're just 2 risalits, 2 pilaster, which are indicated with this very thin lines on the corner that gives the building a border, and it says, okay, here's the end of the building in the horizontal sequence. And then the entablature is quite thin because, it's designed freely in the proportion. But if you look on the facade, you can see that also classical Palladian proportions are applied here. And the special thing about the house is that it looks a bit smaller than it actually is, because of a little trick that I do. If you see the main door of the house, it's separated into 2 elements. So that means the main door is actually 1.50 meter here in this case. So it has the opening element of 1 meter, which is common, and then the whole width of the whole door is 1.50 meter. So if you take this as a reference, you would think the house is smaller than it actually is. So this makes it a bit more humble, let's say, or elegant. This is an element I took from early 19th century. They did it sometime like that. But overall, I like this one because I think it's quite, more or less humble, but still elegant, and just a way to design a single family home in the classical language. And as you can see, it has no ornament, it has no columns, it has no really worked out pilaster. So it's a very simple form to create, in my opinion, a timeless and elegant way of architecture. So, and if you want to see more projects of mine, you can go on my website, so s-architecture.com. They have more projects on it. Or if I should design a house for you or give you assistance somehow, you can contact me there with my email address.